Well, hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven, and our guest today is Charles Reed. He's the president and CEO of a company called GetPayroll. Charles is an accomplished senior executive and entrepreneur with more than 50 years of financial leadership experience in a broad range of industries, as well as being a licensed CPA. So before I tell you more about Charles, let me welcome him to the show. And before we started recording, he promised to not be as dry as other CPAs, right?
Mark, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and I'm glad you're here. And I apologize to other CPAs who are listening, but I guess Charles can say that as well, right?
I go to conventions with him, believe me.
So let me tell you a little bit more about Charles before we get into things. He's a decorated United States Marine Corps sergeant. He was a combat veteran of the Vietnam War. And while in the service, he was trained by IBM as a computer programmer and later a systems engineer. He has a BBA and an MBA from the University of North Texas, and he's the author of books including The Payroll Book, a guide for small businesses and startups. And Charles, for those who are watching on video, you can see both of us holding the book up, and we'll talk about that a little bit more and make sure there's a link in the show notes. Charles, I'm going to confess, so maybe this sets the tone for an episode where we talk freely about mistakes. Before we hear your mistake, I made this mistake once. And those of us without military service, I think we learn not to repeat this. But I was in graduate school, and my internship manager, I made the mistake of referring, it was the Marine Corps birthday. And so there was a celebration, and I made the mistake of referring to him as a former Marine. And I was politely slapped on the wrist for the benefit and education of others. Why do we not say that, Charles?
Once a Marine, always a Marine. I'm just not on active duty.
Yes.
That's all. So, I'm a Marine. Yes. If they call me today, I'll pack up and go.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your service, Charles. And I've learned not to repeat that mistake with you here today, or I think with anyone else. So let's talk about your career, Charles, and the things that you've done. Looking back, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
Well, my favorite mistake now is hubris. When I started this business, I thought I knew everything. Okay. And I thought I could make it grow. And I did a little bit, and it did all right. It was making okay. And then I really determined that I could afford to hire some marketing people. And I realize now, with marketing staff on hand, that personally, I can't market my way out of a paper bag. I'm terrible at it. I'm a great bean counter. I'm a nice guy. I'm a good tax man. I love to fight with the IRS, but I can't market my way out of a paper bag. And so with Anash and Pete and Michael, we're doing things that I could only imagine before. So my mistake was not surrounding myself in that area with people better at it than me. And I've now done that, and I am tickled pink with the results. Still not as fast as I'd like, but a lot faster than it was going in terms of growth and sales and so on. Mm-hmm. I've started hiring on marketing people here about 3-4 years ago. Anash is my third one, and he's the best by far. He hired Michael, my videographer, who set up all this stuff and does all our commercials and our YouTube videos and our educational videos and our video blogs, because that's the world these days. Mm-hmm. And Anash and he handle all our social media, our YouTube channel, etc. Pete is our salesperson, and the three of them do 50 times what I could have done. So that to me is a learning experience, and it's now a mistake that I'm happy I've corrected.
So how did you learn? How did you recognize that was a mistake? I mean, what was happening when you were trying to do marketing without that team?
Well, I did things and I had blogs and videos and other things, but we'd grown enough to get to the point I said, let me take that hat off and put it on somebody else. And the results were just boom. Even with my first one, it was so much better than I'd been doing and so much more effective. The cost benefit was overwhelming. And I said, wow. And he moved on and I brought in another one, a lady, and we did a lot of good things. And she decided to live with her friend in North Carolina after her divorce. So I brought in Anash here about a year and a half ago, and it has just been gangbusters. I can't tell you how great it is to have a staff that can do what I thought I could do.
Now, when you say, I mean, you say you couldn't market your way out of a paper bag, was it a matter of you as president and CEO not having enough time, or were you just doing things that were maybe ineffective, or you thought it would, I'm just curious, like what led you to say, okay, I'm going to hire people?
Suboptimal. Yeah, some of them worked, some of them didn't. But I didn't have enough time. I thought I did. I thought I could do it on the cheap and do it myself. Just one more hat. You can see what wearing all those hats has done to me. So
for those who are just listening, Charles he's shaved his head. Oh no, it's bald. Okay,
I'm just bald.
He has no hair, I guess is the fact. Okay.
I look like my father, so it's genetic. But so yeah, I was trying to do it on the cheap, and it was suboptimal because I didn't have the knowledge or the skill set or the experience or the insight into marketing. CPAs tend to be numbers people, tend to be analytical. On my Briggs Meyer, I'm a very much of an analytical leader, driver type, and not a glad handy, not creative in a marketing sense. And I didn't get it until I hired somebody that could do this, and we're constantly trying things, many of which we discard. But the ones that work, we obviously push. And, the book is part of the marketing. This was something that I was suggested several years ago, and it took me several years to get it done. And it's been great. It's now my business card. I keep a box of them in my trunk to hand out.
Yeah.
It's incredible what skilled people can do that know what they're doing in their field and can bring to a business. It's stupid on my part. I'm in the outsource business. Okay. I know I can't do everything. And I for other people, they outsource their payroll to me and their taxes, and have for years, for 30 years now. Why I didn't realize that I needed to take that hat off and outsource it. Now I actually am using it. I have them in-house, but I outsource that skill set and those expertise. And, the old V8 commercial, I could have had a V8. I could have had marketing for 30 years.
Right.
I wouldn't be Jeff Bezos, but I'd be a hell of a lot richer than I am.
Yeah. So I'm curious, have you reflected on where that hubris, as you described it, came from? Did that hubris come from being successful in different aspects of life and business and thinking, well, here's something else I can be successful in that too? Or have you thought about that?
I'm lucky. I hit the lotto in my birth. My parents were very smart, both university graduates. And I inherited a lot of brains. I can't buy them honestly, but I didn't go out and seek them. They came as part of the package. So I've always been the smartest kid in the class. And I succeed at what I do. I sat for the CPA exam and passed it the first sitting. I sat for the United States Tax Court Practitioner license, and I passed it on the first sitting. You know, my MBA, I did my BBA and my MBA in 2.5 years. I was motivated after the Marine Corps. I've always been able to succeed. I succeeded in jobs I was at, but I did realize that I was never going to run a major corporation, that I didn't have the political skills. I didn't want them. I was unwilling to stab people in the back and toss them off the ladder. So that's why I started my own business. And I thought I could succeed. And I did. I was not unsuccessful. Don't misunderstand. But I wasn't near as successful as I could have been. And that's the mistake I made. And it's just, I think I'm smarter than, the average bear in marketing. I'm not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a certain expression of somebody has to be smart enough or educated enough to know what they don't know.
Right.
Right.
And I've learned that it took me a while, and I've gotten better at it. But yeah, if you're smart enough to realize you don't know what you don't know and go find people that do and can help you, it makes all the difference in the world. I've had good people on staff and in operations and in banking and this kind of thing. My right-hand girl has been with me 23, 24 years now. I've got one accountant that's been with me. God, I don't know how long, but her son, who was in, a coal bucket carrier when she came to work for me, he now has kids. So, graduated from college, got married, now has 2 kids. So it's been a long time. Yeah. So I've had good people, but I thought I could do some of the things, tax, payroll, accounting. I'm a whiz. I'm good at it. Yeah. I work at it. I understand it. It's in my wheelhouse. Marketing's not. And sure. It was a mistake not to bring in marketing people much earlier on.
Yeah. And we'll talk later about fighting with the IRS. I have not had to do that, thankfully, maybe partly because I've had a CPA for the last 10 years that I've had my own independent business to take care of my payroll to myself. I don't have a team, but keeping me in compliance with the IRS, I think, is a big part of what they do between accounting and payroll and the filings and things that would drive me nuts to try to figure out on my own.
You outsource it.
I wouldn't enjoy it. Not worth my time. I probably wouldn't do it well. And the penalties could be more severe than having a marketing campaign that doesn't work, perhaps.
Perhaps. I've seen it be very, very severe. I've seen them put businesses out of business. Mm-hmm. The IRS has no compassion.
That's not their job, I guess.
Nope.
Should they? I mean, should they have, or does it need to be by the books, cut and dry?
I think that it comes and goes. The Congress tried to make for a kindler, gentler IRS, but most of us pay our taxes on time, and the people they deal with most of the time are not paying their taxes and not paying them on time. They're tax cheats, they're scofflaws, they've fallen on hard times and just won't do it, whatever. And they don't talk to the IRS, they hide from them. And so, that's tough work to collect from those people, and everybody should pay their fair share. But yeah, there's times that I would prefer to them to go, okay, we'll work with you. And sometimes they will. And the IRS is mostly good people. Don't misunderstand me. These are mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters. They're like us. You cut them, they bleed. So they're not uncaring, but it's like the police. When you're dealing with crooks all day, you tend to treat everybody like a crook. So if you're dealing with tax cheats all the time, you tend to treat everybody like a tax cheat. And that's human nature as well. So they'll work with you in many cases, but sometimes they don't. And it's hard for them to do so. And, when you get to the collections area, their job is to collect money. It's just like a collector for a business. Their job is not to determine if you owe it or not. Their job is to collect it. And they're hard to work with. But there are levels of appeals and people you can talk to and things you can do if you know what you're doing, or hire an expert that can minimize this. The big deal is, if you're climbing out of a hole, they'll work with you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going deeper in the hole, they won't.
Yeah.
They've got to see that there's an end to this, and that you're going to get out of that hole and you're going to get back into it. If they see, in their opinion, you're not going to, they'll kill the business. They'll stop everything to keep it from getting worse.
Mm. Fair to say that it's better to avoid getting into a fight with the IRS than it is to fight them?
'Tis well if the court acquit thee, 'twere better hadst thou never been tried. Yes.
Yeah. Was that Shakespeare?
Laws of the Navy.
Laws of the Navy.
It's an old poem.
Oh, okay.
My father
Poetry's
was a naval officer. He had me memorize it as a kid.
Okay. Poetry's not my strong suit.
Nor mine.
So, I mean, I want to come back to your story and what you do at GetPayroll a bit, but since we're on the topic of the IRS, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I heard a story on the news the other day. Some were saying the IRS in recent years has been really underfunded, to the point that, let's say, 70% of phone calls coming in, I think it was roughly 70% of phone calls coming in are going unanswered. Is that a mistake? Is that just, I mean, what do you think about those dynamics?
There's a lot of things going on in the IRS, and I've been on the IRS Advisory Council for the last 3 years, dealing with them at headquarters, working on problems and situations, and we've talked about these exact things. And they're trying, in many cases, to automate this as much as possible to prevent that kind of lack of service. But yeah, sometimes I'll get on the phone and wait 2 hours to talk to somebody. They are, in their opinion, under budgeted for what their job is to do. But again, this is civil service. Mm-hmm. There is no profit motive. There is no drive for management to make this a profitable operation. That's not what it is. It's a government entity. It's a bureaucracy. And so you have 100,000 people, 40%, which are eligible for retirement over the next 2 years. It's not the most desirable place for a lot of people to work. I mean, you list all the places you want to work. Where's the IRS fall on it? For most people, it's not at the top. For some people it is, but not for most. It's civil service. A lot of these people have been there for many, many, many years. It's, you know, when you're at the cocktail party, you say, well, I work for the IRS, you kind of find yourself in a bubble and nobody wants to talk to you. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of problems, and Congress has not been forthcoming with the funds that the IRS has requested, though the current administration is proposing another 87,000 employees, which almost doubles the workforce. But that's, wow, you know, billions and hundreds of billions of dollars that they're going to have to get through Congress to be able to hire those people. So, yeah, for the job they're doing, they don't have enough people, technology. Some of the technology, they've tried to revise this to update the technology. Mm-hmm. But some of it, in some parts of it, goes back to the 1960s. Okay?
Old IBM technology, perhaps.
Absolutely, old IBM mainframes. So, yeah, there's internal problems. They are working on them here. A number of years ago, they did this whole technology thing. They spent, at that point in time, $5 billion and gave up because they couldn't get it done. Chuck Reddick, who's an outsider. He's a tax lawyer from San Diego, is the new commissioner, brought in by Donald Trump. And he's working very hard to change things and change the ethic and make it more customer-centric, taxpayer-centric. He's working very hard at that. His wife is a Vietnamese immigrant, and his in-laws don't speak much English at all. So his ability to have the IRS deal with the minority communities and the immigrant communities, he's very big on that. So there's a lot of things going on that are trying to make this a better place. But Technology's behind, and if they ever get caught up in that, that'll help. More people would help, more budget would help. But it is a bureaucracy. It is a civil service government bureaucracy, and we all out here in the real world know that profit motive drives us and forces us to succeed or fail, and they don't have the same motive, so it's tough.
Yeah. When people end up in a fight with the IRS, how often is that the result of the IRS making a mistake as opposed to the business owner, maybe they end up in a fight because they've done something wrong? But what does the IRS make mistakes?
Yeah.
I presume they do. What kind of mistakes do they make?
The IRS makes millions of mistakes. Again, we're talking 100,000 people and obsolete technology in many areas. Part of the areas don't talk to the other areas. There's not the full integration that there should be. So yeah, there's a lot of things that happen, and I get strange errors. I had a couple of clients that on the same day, they both got a notice saying they were due a refund of $7,500 on their 940 taxes each. Got them same day. Between the two of them, they only owed $200. Mm-hmm. The IRS was trying to refund $15,000. Payments get misapplied, even electronically, which I do not understand, but it happens. Things get put in the wrong quarter. A deposit doesn't get posted the right thing, and then all the other deposits get moved, so you now have a whole series of penalties. Forms disappear. I had one client, it cost him several $1,000s in the end. He put both tax returns in a single envelope. And they stapled them together, and they're in the file someplace, right. But that second one didn't get posted, and he can't prove that he sent it, and the statute had expired, and he just had to pay it. He didn't have a choice at that point.
Wow.
It waited too long. So, and that's another thing that happens. If you don't respond to the IRS, time limits can run out, and some of these are statutory, and they're fixed, and if you go past that period of time, you lose all your options. You're SOL. If you haven't filed a court case or an appeals properly by that date, you're out of luck. You just have to pay. You don't have a choice anymore. So those things happen. Yeah, there's the IRS makes millions of mistakes every year, and a lot of them can be fixed. The IRS issued $13 billion of employment tax penalties in fiscal 19. Over half of them got abated, reversed, by people like me that know what they're doing because they were in error. Next thing is the IRS cannot penalize you for a simple mistake, only for gross negligence. But of course, the IRS is the one who determines whether it's gross negligence or a simple mistake until you get it to a court.
Yeah.
So, and this is what I tell clients dealing with the IRS podcasts, is that it's a whole series of no's followed by a single yes. So you appeal. And if ever one IRS officer says to you, yeah, okay, we'll abate that, say thank you very much, shut up and get the hell out of there. Don't say anything else.
Yeah.
So and these things happen. We get penalties abated all the time because they're either simple mistakes, there's an administrative reason, it's an IRS mistake that we correct. We send copies of the forms. And with this last year, at one point in time, the IRS had in excess of 15 million pieces of unopened mail piled up in trucks. I was talking to an IRS agent, appeals officer in Salt Lake, in Utah the other day at Ogden, and she drives by it because she has to go in the office once a week. She still works out of the house because of COVID. And there's trucks, semi-trailers parked in the lot full of bags of mail that have not been opened. I've got returns from last July that haven't been processed.
Wow.
We're getting notices on returns we filed for second quarter of last year that are computer generated because they haven't opened the box where all the forms are yet.
Right. Wow.
This is going on constantly. So that may not be a mistake as such, but I filed the return. I can prove I filed it. The IRS says we haven't processed it yet, so we assume you haven't done it, so you owe money. Come on, people.
Yeah. But if there's some sort of mistake and you end up having to fight it, that's money out of your pocket as the business owner. There's no compensation for that. Right?
No. Now, if
You're looking at me like, oh, that's such a naive question.
if you end up going to U.S. tax court or district court and you substantially prevail, you can request your representative's fees and get them. But that's the only case. So if I go to tax court for a client and I win, substantially prevail, not just partially, but basically win the whole case, then the client or me acting for the client can file to have my fees paid. It doesn't happen automatically and it takes time, and they'll object to the fees level and so on.
There'll be no's until you get a yes, maybe.
And that's because most of these people are attorneys and attorneys make the law. So attorneys make sure they get paid.
Yeah. So, yeah, you talk about some of the mistakes that taxpayers make, stapling something where it says do not staple, or not writing your tax ID number,
not signing it,
check, maybe not signing it. What are some other mistakes, bigger mistakes, more systemic mistakes that entrepreneurs and small businesses make when it comes to payroll?
Well, there's a couple of things. In terms of just administrative penalties, arithmetic mistakes. Make sure your numbers are exactly right. That's the biggest problem the IRS has, is they don't add up. The returns aren't right. The numbers aren't right. The next thing is you need to make all your deposits in full and make them on time. If you're 2 seconds late, there's a penalty. And that's just, you better have a good reason. There better been a hurricane, okay? Yeah. Your forms, they all need to be filed, and they all need to be filed on time. If you'll do those 5 things, you'll avoid most penalties. The next biggest thing that entrepreneurs make as a mistake is classification. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'll just pay them a check. They're an independent contractor. You don't get to choose if they're an independent contractor. Right. There's a whole body of law that determines whether an independent contractor or an employee. And if you don't follow that body of law, you may find yourself getting all this reclassified, and then they want all the taxes that you should have withheld. And they don't care if you paid it out. They still want them. Plus all the taxes you should have paid and interest and penalties on all that. And it can be huge. So if you're an entrepreneur, don't pay people under the table. If you're not sure whether they're independent contractors or employees, check with your CPA or a payroll expert. And find out for sure and pay them correctly. Mm-hmm. What we charge to do payroll is a pittance compared to what the penalties are. 40% of small businesses get penalized every year for employment tax problems. 40%. Wow. So if you didn't get penalized in 19 or 20, this is your year. And it averages $800. Mm-hmm. So guys, it's do it right. Don't try and cut corners with payroll, because you're cutting corners with the IRS, and the IRS doesn't like you to cut corners.
Right. And don't make up your own version of the law. I guess ignorance of the law is never a defense, and that includes
it's never
tax
a defense.
Cases.
It's ignorance of the law is not a defense. I didn't know I had to pay that. Well, it's in the law.
Right.
All you had to do was look it up. All you had to do was to go to the IRS website and start researching. Ask a CPA, whatever. They don't. That's not a simple mistake.
Right.
A simple mistake is, sending it to the wrong address, which will get you a 10% penalty, and you have to fight that. The first time you can get away with it. The second time you won't. There's all kinds of things. Hurricanes, freezes, all kinds of things. They make allowances. Things happen.
Right.
But don't count on it.
Yeah, I think this year, the winter storm that hit Texas and the power outage and all that craziness.
Yeah.
That led to just kind of a blanket delay, right?
Everything was, my taxes aren't due yet. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're not due until the 17th of June. I filed them, get them out of the way. But yeah, I spent 3 days at the house without any heat. It got down to 42 degrees in the house, and I'm embedded in the hillside. So, there were 75 people that died from the cold.
Right.
Or more. It was not a. I don't know what happened to global warming this February, but it wasn't in Texas.
There's a whole episode to be done with somebody about the mistakes that led to the power, because it wasn't even the cold, not to get too sidetracked on it. It wasn't even so much the cold, but it was the power grid problems and power failures and mistakes made in not maintaining or weatherizing.
Not winterizing. It's a bunch of things. If you can get somebody from ERCOT on, it'd be interesting, but they've all resigned.
Yeah. Probably it'll take some time before someone might want to talk about some of that on a podcast, but I'm glad you've been willing to, Charles. And I wanted to come back to one other thing you mentioned earlier in your own work. You've got this marketing team, and you just kind of made a statement. I want to come back to it. You said, well, sometimes you try things and then you discard it. How do you view that? Mistakes, lessons learned. I mean, some mistakes are not the worst thing in the world, because we learned from it. We tried. We didn't know any better. How do you distinguish between like a good lesson learned and, oh, that was a mistake?
Trying anything is, if you sit down in advance and you say, okay, this sounds like a good idea, let's try it, and you try it and it doesn't work, that's a lesson learned. It's not a mistake. It's an error in judgment, if you wish, but it's a learning experience. You're learning that doesn't work. By the same token, when you try something and it works, well, push it. Okay. So what you're doing is you're learning, and it changes. What didn't work? What worked last year may not be working this year. Okay. The world's changed. I mean, I had a friend of mine, Frank Rumbuscus, wrote a book on cold calling sucks. Okay. And it doesn't work anymore.
I think so. Yeah.
The times change. 30 years ago, cold calling worked. It doesn't work today. So you've got to try things. You've got to learn from your mistakes. You've got to learn from your successes, and you've got to keep trying things. Okay. Keep trying things, because the world changes. You got to keep on top of what's going on in the marketplace and how things are working. We just had a major change for us that is probably not even on your horizon. Intuit is killing their own payroll and trying to move everybody to QuickBooks Pay. That's tens of thousands of people who are using it to service their clients that don't want to go to QuickBooks.
Yeah.
So we got a whole push that we're getting ready to roll out here in the next few days, few weeks, to go after that whole thing.
Yeah.
It changes. The payroll scandals from last year have changed things. There were several that were embezzling money and buying private airplanes and other things, and it's caused some disruptions with the banks and with my banks and ACH facilities that we're working through. They've gotten a little stiffer about things, and probably properly so. We're not concerned, but it makes our life more difficult. Dealing with banks is never easy. So you got to keep on top of stuff. And in marketing, it changes.
Yeah. And there's the need to adapt, and tax laws are changing and being updated. And that's another reason to make sure you have some experts helping you out.
Yeah. 70% of all federal revenue, U.S. federal revenue, comes through the payroll system, either in tax withholdings or employment taxes, and so on. Most of the child support in this country runs through payroll. So every time people are changing things to increase revenue, enhance child support, other things, and it's, a lot of locals are looking at payroll and income as a way to raise taxes. I mean, in Philadelphia, the school district taxes income. The school district.
Wow.
City taxes in Indianapolis, Kansas City, New York. They really got into that. When the football players go up there, they charge them income tax on that game. So it changes. I get the trades. I get 5 newsletters a week from the Internal Revenue Service on different aspects of taxation. So I think my favorite analogy, when I grew up, Pele was the world's best soccer player. Okay, a Messi or a Beckman of today. And he was a superb athlete, Brazilian. But if you would take him and stick him in a New York Yankees uniform and put him at second base, he'd be lost.
Right.
He'd still be a great athlete,
Right.
but he'd be lost. He doesn't know the game, the field,
doesn't mean
the
he
rules.
could hit it. Hitting a curveball, good luck.
No, he wouldn't even know what a curveball looked like. He'd go, "What the hell is that?" So, a businessman who's successful, he's a contractor, a mechanic, a dog groomer, a tailor, a butcher, whatever, a farmer, it doesn't matter. He's good at what he does, or he'd be out of business, right? So he's an expert at what he does. He's not a payroll expert. He's not a tax expert. That's what I am, and people like me and other CPAs. That's what we do for a living. We're experts at it. I read all this stuff. I get all the trades. I study it, okay? A lot of it's a cure for insomnia, but I still study it. Extra cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So not to outsource that, not to use experts. It's the mistake I made with marketing. I didn't use an expert at it. I thought I could do it myself. And that's what a lot of business people do with taxes and payroll is they think, it's a paycheck, right? Nah, there's a whole body of law there that you don't even think about or know about. You don't, and we'll go back to where we started. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. But there's a lot in this book, the payroll book, that will explain that.
Yes.
Not as a replacement for you necessarily, but as a good introduction, or people who can't afford a CPA. The book is,
and that's what it's written for. It's written to help you go through some of those things, understand some of those things, realize some of the things you don't know, give you ideas, help. It's 30 years of experience distilled down to 95,000 words. We're getting great reviews on. We're getting great reviews on Amazon. So,
okay. Well, maybe it's just as a final thing, just to close the loop. The story that you told, Charles, and thank you again for sharing that. The other CPA that I had on the podcast, Pam Hoffman, who's in Arizona, her favorite mistake was also on the theme of trying to do it all herself. Now, I know 2 data points is necessarily not a trend, and I'm not going to draw the conclusion that all CPAs try to do it themselves, but I guess it goes to show that for a business person in any setting, there is the risk of falling into that trap.
Yes, absolutely. And I've been dealing with small businesses for 30 years as a business owner and dealing with others. Before that, I was in other businesses, and it's not uncommon. These are smart people. They have discipline. They have skills. They're successful. And it's easy when you're successful in one thing to think you'll be successful in everything. I learned the hard way, but I learned.
Well, and with the passage of time, I'm glad you can laugh about it and share it with us here.
It's either laugh or cry, one of the two, and I'd rather laugh.
Oh, good. So Charles Reed, again, he's the president and CEO of GetPayroll. You can find their website at getpayroll.com. And in the show notes, I'll link to the book, the Payroll Book, A Guide for Small Businesses and Startups. So Charles, thank you. I wasn't I wasn't dreading this because, I wasn't going to expect a CPA to be dry, even though you painted with that broad brush. But thank you. Thank you for being a great guest.
Mark, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No, that was good. Thanks again.